I personally think it's too much. I would keep it at 3. Your opening seed, 2 affirming experiences, and then your conclusion. That way you're not taking the reader on this crazy journey and they're trying to figure out all the things that you're doing and that's going on. Hi, this is Crispen, and I am recording another episode of PS or BS. Thank you first and foremost for sharing your personal statement with me and allowing me to provide you some feedback. So I'll come back to those edits in a minute. First and foremost, if this is an AMCAS essay, keep in mind 5,093 characters. Still have a few hundred characters that you can add to. If it's Texas, probably need to cut a little bit and we'll talk about that. But you always want to be close to the character count to make sure you use up as much real estate as they give you to present yourself in the best possible light. So let's just get started. I've seen this a couple times and it's truly not my favorite way to start a personal statement. You talk about the simultaneous hospitalizations of my grandparents became my motivation to pursue a career in medicine. I personally don't think that particular lead in is needed. I'd rather you just jump in and start with the story. Tell me what's going on, do your thing, and get started. Don't worry about the lead in sentence. That being said, I think there's some structure that needs to happen to the seed that you've got going on here. So you say, at the age of 7, you give the story and you say, at the age of 7, I began to comprehend the impact of groundbreaking research on patient outcomes. That disingenuous, believe it or not. I know some 7-year-olds, I have a hard time thinking they even know what the word research means. Understanding it as it relates to patient outcomes is a bigger stretch. I totally get that this is you looking back and reflecting, but I don't think this is gonna land very well for anyone. If I read this as an admissions committee member, I would question it, to be perfectly honest. But you talk about your grandmother and you talk about your grandfather being in the hospital and things like that. These are perfectly fine seeds and sparks overall. The thing that I'm not really sure about is why. What about this experience? And this is where I get into it here. What about this experience has driven you to want to pursue a career in medicine as you lead out the paragraph with? Was it their illnesses in and of itself and the curiosity you had? Was it the interactions that the physicians had with them, that they had with their family? What about this experience led you to think, yes, I want to be a doctor? It can't just be you being a 7-year-old and jumping into research. That's too far fetched for me. So, really think back about this experience. Think about the interactions with the physicians, things like that. Think about how you were feeling when your grandparents were in the hospital, all of that stuff. So, start giving me a bigger, broader picture. I personally think this is a very short paragraph for an opening seed spark anyway. I feel like it's usually either one long paragraph or a couple of paragraphs. So I think there's a little more to add here that can really give us a good picture of what started you on your goals and journey to become a physician. And so then you jump into talking about shadowing some physicians. Okay, that's fine. And you talk about how you see different physicians approach different conversations. And you give an example of a Dr. H and a patient who received news that they had esophageal cancer. Okay, I totally get that. And then you give a very short one sentence reflection of the doctor who is very sensitive and using his knowledge, that kind of thing. So, again, if this is one of your watering events or one of your affirming events, this experience with this particular doctor, tell me why. I think this is a weak reflection. What I would really like to see in this paragraph and maybe one additional one would be the story of the conversation. How did Dr. H use his skill and knowledge of medicine? How was he sensitive? How did he help provide comfort and compassion to patients who just received very bad news? Tell me that story and then give me a bigger reflection on what that means to you, specifically as it relates to why you want to be a doctor. Again, I don't have an issue per se with the story that you're using. I just don't think there's enough of a story there. And I definitely don't think there's enough of a reflection here. So Tell me why you want to be a doctor and how this particular experience stands out to you as one that influenced that goal. And so then the next few paragraphs, I'll be very honest with you, I don't think any of them are needed. You talk about research, you talk about doing clinical research, then you talk about experiences as an athlete, and then you talk about more female specific athletic research. Not any of these really give a reflection as to how they may have impacted your goals to become a physician. When I read through this, I really read this as a narrative of the long journey you've taken to get to be here today. So, personally, I don't think these are the right things to put into this personal statement unless you can tell me why one of them has influenced your goal to become a physician. Anything beyond that, I'm just not sure it's the right thing. So I would say all of these highlighted paragraphs, and I've highlighted each one with comments. I truly don't think they're the right thing for your personal statement. I could be missing something, and that's okay. If that's the case, I need a better reflection. I don't think research generally is something I would put in the personal statement. I would rather see the clinical interactions and things like that that you have engaged with. And in general, it's one, it's two, three, four separate experiences on top of the shadowing with Dr. H and on top of the grandparents. I personally think it's too much. I would keep it at three: your opening seed, two affirming experiences, and then your conclusion. That way, you're not taking the reader on this crazy journey and they're trying to figure out all the things that you're doing and that's going on. So I really do think you want to think about that body of the statement because I think there's definitely something missing there. All right. And I'll be very honest, I don't mind the conclusion. I am one that likes the conclusion that gives me a general look back of the events that have brought you here today. You do a good job of kind of telling me why you want to be a doctor. I do want you to use a level of caution, though. I highlighted this one here and talk about understanding the challenges that of a life in medicine and embracing those challenges. I don't know that you are ready to say that. Certainly just embrace life in medicine and what it might potentially bring to you. Getting too far into that, it may not land well with some of the readers who are physicians. I'd rather them not take a collective step back just in case it doesn't land well with them. But in general, I don't have an issue with your conclusion. I just think the biggest part of the gap is really here in this center section, which I think needs some work still. In the notes that I provided to you, I've summarized basically what I'm telling you, that we need to focus again on the things that you feel have helped you decide that you want to be a doctor. It's easy to get caught up in the whole tell me all the stories and all the things, but I think it gets to be too much and then it becomes a whole narrative of all the things you're going to do. So, by the you hope to demonstrate growth and adequacy, you're not really selling yourself. You're answering a prompt of why you want to be a doctor. So here, I don't think you need to demonstrate that. And I don't necessarily think that you're not authentic. I just don't think you're giving enough information about your experiences. And again, you don't need to tell me you're going to go the extra mile when you've probably spent 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years putting all the things together to become a physician. Yes, we totally get that. I would just rather you think about why you want to be a doctor and then toward the end, really lean into being aspirational, thinking about the kind of physician you hope to become. I have a feeling the bones and the pieces are there. You just have to do a little bit of restructuring and again, reflect. Really pay attention to these couple experiences that you're going to put in the body and be reflective as to how they support and affirm why you want to be a doctor. All right. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I do appreciate that.